Neither the Bible nor Quran identifies the Pharaoh of Moses by name. We can use the details provided in the scriptures to try to identify the Pharaoh. Both scriptures speak of the Israelites being taken into slavery before the birth of Moses. The use of Semites for slave labour occurred only during the New Kingdom period. So, we can place Moses somewhere in the New Kingdom period. This gives us a list of 33 possible pharaohs. Both scriptures also speak of an exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt. The Merneptah stele is an important artifact that contains the first explicit reference to Israel in the archaeological record. It is dated to around 1208 BCE. It discusses the land of Canaan and mentions the Israelites in relation to Canaan, indicating that the Exodus had already taken place by this date. The artifact is contemporaneous to the pharaoh Merneptah. This means that the Exodus had to take place before Merneptah, since Merneptah was alive and in power after the Exodus and not drowned in the sea. This establishes an upper boundary in the timeline of the pharaohs. From the point of view of both the Bible and Quran, we are now left with 18 pharaohs as candidates who may have ruled during the time of Moses. Let's now delve deeper into the biblical narrative. The Bible claims that there were 2 different pharaohs who were in power. The first died while Moses was in hiding in Midian. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The new Pharaoh continued his predecessor's persecution of the Israelites, and it was his second Pharaoh who was later drowned when Moses crossed the sea. The Bible gives us a timeline for these events. The burning bush encounter with God took place when Moses was 80 years old. So from his birth to the Exodus, there was a span of at least 80 years, during which 2 pharaohs ruled Egypt. Now, there is a big problem if we compare this biblical narrative to the timeline of the pharaohs. We've seen that the Bible claims exactly 2 pharaohs ruled during the 80-year period from the birth of Moses to the Exodus. If we consider the number of years that each of the pharaohs ruled, we can see that there is no 80-year period during which only 2 pharaohs ruled. Any given 80-year period will give you at least 3 pharaohs in power. We can see that the biblical narrative contradicts the historical evidence. Let's now compare the Quranic narrative. Unlike the Bible, the Quran depicts a single pharaoh reigning from the birth of Moses all the way up to the Exodus. The Quran informs us that Moses fled to Midian when he reached the age of maturity. The Quran defines the age of maturity as 40 years old. The Quran also informs us that during his time in Midian, Moses spent 8 to 10 years in the service of his father-in-law before returning to Egypt to face Pharaoh. This means that Moses was at least 48 years of age when the Exodus happened. The only Pharaoh during the New Kingdom period who had such a lengthy reign as an absolute ruler was Ramesses II, who ruled for 66 years. The Quranic account is perfectly in line with the historical evidence and fixes the chronological issues that are present in the biblical narrative. Let's now compare the life and religion of Ramesses II to the claims that the Quran makes about the Pharaoh of Moses.
وَإِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ لَعَالٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِنَّهُ لَمِنَ الْمُسْرِفِينَ.
This claim that the Pharaoh of Moses was extravagant has been proven by archaeological discoveries, which show that Ramesses II was the grandest of the pharaohs. The archaeologist Peter Clayton wrote, "His genuine building achievements are on a Herculean scale." The archaeologist Eric Uphill wrote, "The palace of Ramesses was probably the vastest and most costly royal residence ever erected by the hand of man." The Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen wrote, "Certainly, in his building works for the gods, Ramesses II surpassed not only the 18th dynasty, but every other period in Egyptian history." With regards to the religion of the Pharaoh of Moses, the Quran makes the following claim.
فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى.
The Quran states that the Pharaoh of Moses was arrogant, exalting himself to the position of God. Modern archaeological discoveries have proven this to be true. Ramesses II built the great temple at Abu Simbel to honour himself. Its entrance is flanked by 4 colossal statues of Ramesses II, which dwarf the statue of Ra Horakti, god of the horizon, located above it. This temple also contains an image of Ramesses II making a sacrifice to his divine self. The Quran makes the following claim about the Pharaoh of Moses, who God drowned in the sea.
فاليوم ننجيك ببدنك لتكون لمن خلفك آية.
We can see that the Quran explicitly states that the Pharaoh's body will be preserved as a sign for future generations. Note that the Quran never makes such a statement about any of the other destroyed nations that it discusses, typically stating that their abandoned buildings and ruins have been made signs for later generations. This claim about a body being preserved is unique to the Pharaoh of Moses. The body of Ramesses II was discovered by archaeologists in the year 1881 CE. The mummy has been on display in the Cairo Museum, and over the last century, it has been seen by millions of tourists from all over the world. In the following documentary, Sir Tony Robinson states that Ramesses II is one of the few pharaohs whose body has survived largely intact.
Just across the river from Luxor lies the famous Valley of the Kings, where Ramesses himself was buried. His mummy was discovered in 1881. One of the few pharaohs whose body has survived largely intact.
Historically, priests had concealed his body in a secret location in the year 1000 BCE because of a problem with grave robbers. Nothing was known about his mummy in the intervening period of almost 3,000 years. At the time the Quran was revealed, the whereabouts and fate of Pharaoh's body was unknown. During the 3,000-year period in which the body was hidden, it could easily have been damaged or stolen. It may have even remained lost forever, locked away in its secret location, never to be rediscovered. If you think about it, these statements in the Quran are not only historically accurate, but also represent quite a bold prophecy. The Bible informs us about a series of plagues that God brought upon Egypt. The book of Exodus informs us that the first 6 of these plagues are as follows. First, the Nile was turned into blood. Second, masses of frogs. Third, swarms of mosquitoes. Fourth, swarms of flies. Fifth, the death of livestock. Sixth, boils on people and animals. Now at first glance, this series of plagues in the biblical narrative may seem random and unrelated. However, the Quran sheds light on these events. The Quran states the following about the divine punishments against Egypt.
فأرسلنا عليهم الطوفان والجراد والقمل والضفادع والدم آيات مفصلات فاستكبروا.
Notice the first punishment mentioned by the Quran, a flood. This is an important detail that is not found in the Bible. This punishment of a flood actually explains the 6 seemingly random and unrelated plagues in the biblical narrative. A flood would result in high concentrations of red earth entering the Nile River and causing a blood-like colour, killing fish and making the water undrinkable, as described in the biblical narrative. This phenomenon is attested to historically, as recorded by a Middle Kingdom Egyptian sage. See, the river is blood. One shrinks from other people and thirsts for water. The rest of the biblical plagues are also easily explained as a consequence of the flood. Frogs, mentioned in plague number 2, are known to fill the land after Nile floods. The death of the frogs recorded in the biblical narrative can be caused by contamination of anthrax, that was carried over from the rotting fish. Mosquitoes, mentioned in plague number 3, proliferate after Nile floods, as the pools of water left over from the flooding would have allowed them to overbreed. Swarms of flies, mentioned in plague number 4, would be brought about by the massive death of frogs on the land. The death of pasturing livestock, mentioned in plague number 5, can be explained by anthrax, as brought on the land by the frogs. The boils on humans and cattle, mentioned in plague number 6, may have been caused by bites. The stable fly in particular is infamous for its vicious biting of mammals. We can see that the Quran's mention of a flood easily explains the biblical plagues, which are not random as initially appears to be the case, but in fact a series of interrelated events. The Quran mentions the following incident about Joseph while he was in Egypt.
وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين.
Here the Quran states that Joseph was sold for a paltry price. The Arabic phrase used is darahima ma'dudatin, which contains the words dirham and ma'dud. Dirham means a unit of silver coinage or weight. Ma'dud means countable or limited in number. So the Quran is making the claim that Joseph was sold for a small amount of countable silver. There is plenty of historical evidence that standardized units of silver were used in transactions in ancient Egypt. Small pieces of silver, known as shati, were used in trade. The tomb of Nyanknum and Khnumhotep is dated to the Old Kingdom period. It contains a scene of a busy open-air market with goods for sale. Cubits of cloth, for example, are said to be sold for 6 shati. The Rind mathematical papyrus is dated to the Second Intermediate period. It discusses the relative values of gold, silver and lead in terms of shati. Small silver bars bearing the name of Pharaoh Tutankhamun have been dated to the New Kingdom period. They are inscribed with a hieroglyphic which states, Tutankhamun, ruler of Heliopolis in Upper Egypt. Until recently, historians believed that the minting of precious metals was a later Greek invention. These recent Egyptian archaeological discoveries have forced historians to completely revise their understanding of coinage in the ancient world. How is it possible that such knowledge was revealed in the Quran nearly 1,500 years ago? The Bible mentions that Joseph was sold for 20 of silver. However, this sale is said to have taken place with some Arabs outside Egypt. By contrast, the Quran states that the sale took place inside Egypt. So, the Bible could not have been used as a source by the Quran. It is in fact the Bible that contains historical errors when it comes to coinage. For example, the Bible makes the claim that a gold coin known as the darik was used at the time of King David. They gave toward the work on the temple of God 5,000 talents and 10,000 darics of gold. As historians point out, the darik is named after the Persian leader Darius the Great, who lived hundreds of years after King David. The Jewish Encyclopedia acknowledges this error. A notable instance of anachronism occurs in 1 Chronicles 29:7. Gold darics, coins which were not struck before the time of King Darius I, i.e. more than 400 years after David.